Ever notice how some people just seem to feel everything so much more intensely?
Mm-hmm.
Like bright lights are like actually blinding and loud noises are just unbearable.
Right.
And don't even get them started on scratchy sweaters.
Oh, yeah.
If this sounds kind of familiar, well, today's deep dive just might help you understand why.
Absolutely.
We're diving into some fascinating excerpts from a book about, get this, high sensitivity.
Okay.
It's called High Sensitivity is a Gift by Ilse Sand.
Interesting.
And it explores, what high sensitivity actually is, how it might show up in a person's life.
Sure.
And get this, even offer some practical advice on how to actually thrive in a world that often feels kind of overwhelming.
Right. Yeah.
So let's unpack it, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay, so the book starts off by saying something really interesting, which is that high sensitivity
Okay.
is actually a real scientifically recognized trait.
It is, yeah. It's not just in your head, as they say.
Exactly.
It's a real thing.
And about 15 to 20% of the population experiences it,
Yeah, that's right.
which is a lot more people than you might think, actually.
It is, yeah. It's more common than people think.
Right.
And a lot of people don't even realize, that they are highly sensitive.
Totally. And here's the thing, though. It's not a disorder.
Exactly.
It's more like, a personality trait, kind of like introversion or extroversion.
Right.
It shapes how you experience the world around you.
I like to call it a neutral trait.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's not good or bad. It's just, part of who you are,
I like that.
how you process the world.
And here's where it gets even more interesting, I think.
Okay.
The book says that high sensitivity can actually express itself differently across cultures.
Oh, really?
Isn't that interesting? For example, there was this survey, and the way Danish women responded to it was completely different from how North American women responded to the same questions about sensitivity.
Huh?
It's not even about whether someone is more sensitive or less sensitive than another person.
Right.
It's about how sensitivity is perceived and even encouraged differently in different cultures, which I thought was just so fascinating.
It is interesting how these cultural differences can really shape how we view sensitivity.
Totally. Okay, so I'm curious,
Sure.
what's actually going on in the brain
Yeah.
of someone with high sensitivity? What makes them react so strongly to all these things that
Yeah.
other people might not even notice?
Yeah, so that's a great question.
I mean, that's what I'm here for, right?
You got it. Well, you see, highly sensitive people, or HSPs as they're often called,
Okay.
they process information really, really deeply. They don't just kind of skim the surface.
Right.
They're picking up on all those little details that other people might miss, like a subtle shift in someone's tone of voice,
Uh-huh.
or maybe a really faint scent in the air.
Wow.
Yeah, they're like artists, they're absorbing and interpreting the world with all this incredible sensitivity.
Okay, so it's like their senses are just turned up.
Exactly.
The volume's just a little bit higher.
Exactly. Yeah, and their brains are wired to process all that information really deeply.
Wow.
Which is why they might be, more easily overwhelmed by a lot of stimulation.
Right, because it's just so much input all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so imagine it's like their mental RAM is always close to full.
Right.
One stray thought too many, and the whole system just freezes.
That's a great analogy. Yeah. They just get overloaded.
Yeah, they get overwhelmed by all the stimulation.
And that's why, that's probably why, for example, you feel really deeply moved by other people's emotions.
Uh-huh.
Or maybe you pick up on those little cues that everyone else seems to miss.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
You're just more tuned in, more aware.
Interesting. So there's actually scientific evidence that backs this up.
Yeah. The book actually mentions some research using fMRI scans, and it showed that HSPs actually have more active mirror neurons than other people do. And just so you know, these mirror neurons are what make us empathetic.
Right.
It's what allows us to kind of step into someone else's shoes and understand and even share in their feelings.
That makes a lot of sense, actually,
Right.
because it's almost like they're feeling what other people are feeling a little bit more deeply.
Absolutely, they are.
Wow. Okay, so that's fascinating. So we know that HSPs process things more deeply. They've got those, the neurons firing like crazy.
Yes.
What does that actually look like in everyday life, though?
Right.
How does that actually play out for someone?
Yeah. Good question.
It's easy to get like caught up in the challenges of being highly sensitive,
Right.
you know, like feeling overwhelmed in certain situations or whatever.
Yeah.
But this book, it does a really good job of reminding us that sensitivity isn't just about feeling things like more intensely.
Right.
It's also about experiencing things on a much deeper, more meaningful level, which I thought was cool.
Absolutely, yeah. Think about it. When was the last time you were completely blown away by something, like a piece of art?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Or maybe you heard a song that just gave you goosebumps. Or maybe even simpler, you just spent some time in nature and you felt completely at peace.
Yeah,
Those are all examples of how our senses can really deepen our experiences.
totally.
And HSPs, they just experience that on a whole other level, which is pretty amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, it's like their senses unlock a whole other dimension of the experience that other people might be missing out on.
Exactly. It's like they're seeing the world in high definition while everyone else is stuck with, the standard version.
That's a great analogy. I like that.
Thanks.
And it's not just, about the beautiful or inspiring things either. The book also talks about how HSPs can be really bothered by things that other people might not even notice.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like strong scents.
Ugh, yes.
Or certain fabrics.
Right.
Or even just being in, crowded spaces.
Exactly. And those things can be really, really overwhelming for a highly sensitive person.
So it's like their senses are always on high alert, picking up on all these subtle cues that other people are just oblivious to.
Exactly. It's like they have a highly tuned sensory system. Like, I know for me, even just a little bit of perfume can be way too much.
Oh, interesting.
But someone else might not even notice it,
Oh, right. Yeah, totally.
And it's not just about feeling a little bit uncomfortable either.
Yeah.
This kind of constant sensory overload, it can lead to, some real anxiety.
Right.
Even exhaustion.
Yeah.
Especially if HSPs aren't able to, escape those triggers or take a break or something.
It's like a double-edged sword in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Because on the one hand, you get to experience the world with this, incredible depth and richness.
Right.
But on the other hand, you have to be so mindful of your environment all the time and set boundaries to protect your energy, which can be exhausting in and of itself.
It definitely is. You got to be your own advocate, especially in a world that's not always designed for your sensitivity.
Right. And speaking of which, remember that guy, Eric, from the book?
Oh, yeah.
He was the one who would always have to leave, social gatherings early,
Right.
because he'd get so overstimulated. And it was just, too much for him to handle.
Yep. And, the book talks about how people didn't always get it,
Oh, no, I'm sure.
They thought he was just being, antisocial or whatever.
Right.
But for him, it was, really a matter of, self-preservation.
Totally.
He had to take care of himself,
I can only imagine how hurtful and isolating that must feel.
Oh, for sure.
Especially when you're already kind of navigating a world that doesn't always, understand or accept your sensitivity.
Yeah, and that's why, the book talks about the importance of self-esteem for HSPs.
Right.
Because when you're constantly feeling like you have to apologize for who you are or mask your true self just to fit in,
It can really take a toll.
it's like you said earlier, you got to be your own advocate.
Exactly. You have to learn to embrace your sensitivity,
Yeah.
own it,
Yeah, that makes sense.
because it's not a weakness. It's a strength.
Totally. Honestly, it kind of breaks my heart to think about people feeling like they have to apologize for being sensitive,
Yeah, it's sad.
Like it's a bad thing or whatever.
Right.
But this book, what I like about it is it's not just about the struggles.
Yeah.
It also has a ton of practical advice on how to actually thrive as an HSP.
It does, yeah.
And the best part is that it starts with something, honestly, I think we could all probably work on, HSP or not,
Oh, okay.
which is acceptance.
Right.
Just embracing your sensitivity as a core part of who you are.
Absolutely. Not something to hide or be ashamed of.
It's so important.
Easier said than done, right?
Yeah, for sure. It can be tough.
But the book makes this really good point about how, just opening up to, trusted friends or family members can make a world of difference.
It really can. Just having that support system, people who get it, it makes a huge difference.
Totally. Because even just being able to say out loud to someone, hey, this is something I struggle with,
Right.
it can honestly, lighten the load so much.
Oh, 100%.
And it can help the people in your life, understand how to support you better, which is huge.
Absolutely, yeah. And it can even be as simple as, just asking for what you need.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that example in the book about the person who finally worked up the courage to ask their coworker to, use headphones for their loud phone calls.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's not about being like demanding or anything. It's just about, setting those healthy boundaries for yourself.
Yeah, and sometimes those small changes can honestly make a world of difference.
They really can.
Okay, so for managing overstimulation specifically, the book has some really good practical advice.
Like what?
Things like scheduling regular breaks throughout the day.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Making time for those quiet activities you enjoy, whatever those might be.
Right.
Even something as simple as like taking a walk in nature can really help kind of soothe your nervous system.
It's like hitting the reset button on your senses.
Yes. Yeah.
Reminding yourself that you have the power to create an environment that feels nurturing and supportive rather than chaotic and overwhelming.
I love that.
Yeah.
And okay, this next idea from the book.
Okay.
This one really resonated with me, I gotta say.
Oh, okay. I'm curious.
It talks about embracing healthy sadness.
Healthy sadness. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Sounds kind of strange at first.
It does.
But the book argues that instead of trying to push away difficult emotions, like whether it's sadness, anger, or whatever, we can actually learn from them.
Oh, interesting.
It's about trying to understand the root of those feelings.
Okay.
So maybe there's an unmet need or a boundary that's been crossed.
Yeah, yeah.
And then responding to ourselves with compassion.
That's huge.
So it's not about wallowing in sadness. It's more like recognizing it as a signal.
Right.
Hey, something needs your attention here.
Exactly. Yeah. And by allowing ourselves to, actually feel those feelings, not push them away.
Yeah.
That's how we can actually strengthen our relationship with ourselves.
Right.
And even with others.
I love that. Wow, this book really makes you think. It makes you wonder if the key to living a more fulfilling life, whether you're an HSP or not, is to learn to really embrace your sensitivity, not suppress it. Maybe by tuning in to our own unique needs and experiences, we can unlock a deeper level of understanding, connection, and even joy. Something to think about, right?
Absolutely. I think so.